The first time I knocked on Mrs. Evelyn Parker's door, I wasn't trying to become a hero. I was just returning her trash can. The wind had blown it halfway down the street after a storm, and the 78-year-old widow was struggling to drag it back to her driveway. I carried it the rest of the way, expecting nothing more than a grateful smile. Instead, she invited me inside for coffee. Her house felt painfully quiet. Family photos covered every wall, birthdays, graduations, weddings, but every frame seemed to belong to people who hadn't visited in years. She apologized 3 times for talking too much before admitting I was the first person she'd shared coffee with in nearly 6 months. That sentence stayed with me. It haunted me while I drove to work, while I ate dinner alone, and while I lay awake staring at my ceiling. Maybe it was because I knew what loneliness felt like. My divorce had been finalized a year earlier. My daughter had moved across the country with her mother. The house I'd once filled with laughter now echoed every time I closed a door. Friends slowly disappeared into their own busy lives, and weekends became something I learned to survive instead of enjoy. So when I saw another lonely neighbor, I couldn't just walk away. It started with little things. I helped Mrs. Parker replace burned-out light bulbs. I carried groceries for Mrs. Delgado after her hip surgery. I fixed the broken mailbox for Hannah, a young nurse who worked impossible hours and always looked exhausted. I mowed the lawn for Carol after learning she'd lost her husband to cancer just 8 months earlier. Each favor took only a little time. But every conversation lasted much longer. People didn't just need help carrying boxes. They needed someone to ask how they were doing, and actually wait for the answer. Word spread through Maple Street faster than I expected. Soon, my phone buzzed every day. Could you help me move a dresser? My sink is leaking. My porch light won't turn on. Would you mind driving me to the pharmacy? Some requests were practical. Others were simply excuses not to spend another evening alone. At first, saying yes felt incredible. Every smile reminded me that kindness still mattered. Every thank you note tucked into my mailbox gave me purpose I hadn't felt since my marriage ended. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about everything I'd lost. I was thinking about who needed me today. Neighbors started calling me the nicest man on Maple Street. Children waved when I drove past. People left homemade cookies on my porch. Even strangers smiled when they heard my name. I told myself I was simply being a good neighbor. Nothing more. But kindness has a strange way of growing. 1 yes becomes 10. 10 becomes 50. Then one day, I realized I hadn't had a free evening in almost 3 months. Monday belonged to Mrs. Parker. Tuesday was Carol's grocery run. Wednesday meant helping Hannah repair something around her house. Thursday was dinner with Mrs. Wilson because she hated eating alone. Friday became movie night with 3 widows who insisted I was part of the family now. Weekends disappeared entirely. I laughed it off whenever coworkers asked why I looked exhausted. I'm just helping people. But I wasn't sleeping enough. I skipped doctor's appointments because someone else needed a ride. I canceled fishing trips I'd planned for months. I stopped answering calls from old friends because I was already committed somewhere else. Even my daughter, Emma, noticed. "Dad," she said during one of our Sunday video calls, "when was the last time you actually did something just for yourself?" I couldn't answer. She smiled gently. "You always taught me that caring for people is important." It is. But you also taught me that you can't pour from an empty cup. I changed the subject. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Still, every time I considered saying no, I pictured those lonely faces. Mrs. Parker eating dinner by herself. Carol sitting beside an empty recliner that used to belong to her husband. Hannah collapsing onto her couch after another 14-hour hospital shift. How could I refuse them? Then came the Saturday everything changed. At exactly 9 in the morning, my phone rang. Mrs. Parker needed help reaching boxes in her attic. Before I could leave, Carol texted asking if I could take her to urgent care. While reading her message, Hannah knocked on my front door because her car wouldn't start. At that exact moment, Mrs. Wilson called in tears after locking herself outside her house. 4 women. 4 genuine needs. All at the same time. I froze. For the first time, someone was going to hear me say no. And I realized something that terrified me. Every person believed they were my priority. Every person believed I'd come. Because I'd never once given them a reason to think otherwise. My hand started shaking as I stared at my phone. More messages appeared. Then another. Then another. I wasn't just helping lonely women anymore. I'd quietly become the person holding together lives that should never have depended on one neighbor. And somehow, without meaning to, I had let things go far beyond simple kindness.